Good morning. I am really happy to be here. And I wanted to kind of continue in our thoughts about the celebration of our church and its founding and its homecoming that all take place September, October. And I have a phenomenal story to tell you. And I know you'll believe every word because every word is true. I've really researched my memory on this. And I have a timeline because it's important. I don't use notes because if I don't know what I'm going to say by the time I get here, it's too late. So I don't like lecterns because I don't want to have anything between us. But so be it. As I share this story with you, I would like for you to feel the power and the majesty of divine order, of God, of the movement of the universe to fulfill needs and to make things happen in the most lovely and beautiful way. As you see this, I want you to say, I'm not looking at this from the outside in. I'm in. I'm looking at it from the inside. And I'm seeing that these things that happen spectacularly, divinely, wonderfully, beautifully in the lives of others can and do and have happened in my life. So this is not a story about Arthur and the window. This is a story about divine order. And the story took place in the around 1984. And I was in my very early 40s, and I had founded the church in my very late 29s. And so the idea was that we were coming together. We had jam-packed services in our chapel, and we had overflow attendance, and we needed a larger building. And we all agreed, it was a unanimous agreement, to build a larger building. And that the plans for that, according to the property we had at that time, was on the that side of the chapel. Well, yours and mine aren't the same because we're not facing the same direction. And so we knew that we wanted to build a larger home for our future, for our needs at the time, and then for others who would come, and we knew they would be here, and they are here, and that's you. So we were thinking of you as we did all this. And we were building we had the plans were being worked on, and we were really busy getting it ready to happen. And one morning on a Sunday, now this is a fortnight of adventure I had. On Sunday, a very lovely lady, Bonnie Friedenborg, who passed away in the past month, came out of church with a piece of paper that big from the newspaper that said Church Items Auction. And it had a phone number. The auction today, Sunday at 1 o'clock. Well, by the time I got, and she said, I found this in the paper and I thought of you. I took it, I put it in my pocket. And when I got to it, it was past time and the auction was over. And but I thought how sweet of her to think of me, and I wondered what they had at a church furnishings auction. And so I thought about tossing the little piece of paper, but then I thought, no, this came to me. And because it came to me from somebody I love and respect, and she took the time to cut it out, I have to take the time to follow up on this. So I called the number, and I spoke to a man who had just finished with the auction. He was tired, but he wanted to talk. And his name was Dominique. And he said, yeah, I could call him Dom. And he said the next day was Monday, and he was going to go to Pennsylvania and that part of the United States to search out churches that were being demolished for their contents to bring back to San Diego because his church auction had gone so well. And he said he'd be bringing back pulpits and pews and baptismal founts and all kinds of things. He said, is there something specific I can look for you? Well, I hadn't even thought about it at that point, but I said, well, we want to build a beautiful building, and we want to put something in it or around it that, will make it outstanding. But right now we don't have any place to put a pulpit or pews or anything like that. But in Forest Lawn, they have the most beautiful chapel, and the background for the altar is a life-size statue of Jesus ministering to some children. And it's just so beautiful that maybe if we had a statue, we could put it outside, and then it could withstand the weather and all, and then when we built our building, maybe that could be part of the focal point in our sanctuary. And so he said, okay, I'll look for statues. And so then that was Monday. Then on Tuesday, I got a call from the state of Washington, and it was a woman that I knew, and she had been a part of my Youth of Unity group that I had when I was the youth minister at the San Diego church back in the 60s. And she said, you know me, and we have a bond of memories together. And she said, and you know my father, George, and you knew my mother, Jen, and you had my mother's memorial service. And she said, well, my father is 79 years old, and he's very cantankerous, and he came to live with us, and that didn't work out, and he has run away. And he's perfectly capable of getting around and doing what he needs to do and being where he needs to be. He can catch buses and airplanes and so forth. So but I think he's headed for San Diego. We don't know where he is or what's up, but we think he's headed for San Diego. And if George calls you, don't be alarmed, and he's okay. And if there's anything you can do to help him, go ahead. We're mad at him, but we still love him. And please call me, here's my number, in case he shows up, because we are worried. So that was Tuesday. Wednesday, George called and said, hello, Reverend, you know me, you did Jen's memorial service, and we came to church. Well, he didn't really come very often, Easter, Mother's Day. And so he said, I've been in San Diego a few days, and I'm staying at the Town and Country Hotel. And it's expensive here. He said, I'm 79 years old, and I have $179,000 in the bank. But I can't afford to stay here. And I have that money to ensure my care and keeping in the future. You never know what's going to happen. And he said, could you help me find a place to live? Well, with the connections and the service I had done, I knew a lovely lady that had moved to a place in Hillcrest, and she asked me to come and see her there and bless her apartment, which we did. And she was delightful. It was delightful. They had food and theater trips and shopping and everything. So it was very nice and very affordable. So I told George about it, and he asked me if I would come and get him on Wednesday and show it to him. I did. Then we got back in my car and went back to the Town and Country, checked him out, and moved his suitcase and some other items that he had back to his new residence at the place in Hillcrest. And so that was Wednesday. And in the meantime, I'm booking weddings, and I'm doing all the teaching classes and doing the things that I did at work, besides having two little boys to help manage and get to and from school and stuff. So then on Thursday, Dom called, and he said, I found Jesus and the children. And I said, how are they? And he said, they're not a statue. They're a window. And I went, oh. And he said, it's a Louis Comfort Tiffany window, and it's stained glass. And it's almost 100 years old. And it's in a church that's being converted into a senior center, and they want all their religious art out of that building. And it's available. And he said it's 18 feet high and 15 feet wide, and it depicts Jesus and the children. He said, it's magnificent, it's beautiful, it's authentic Louis Comfort Tiffany from Tiffany's studios in New York, and it's been in this church in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, almost 100 years. And I said, how much is it? He said, it's $50,000. And he said, it's not on the market yet, so if you're going to do anything, we need to act as swiftly as we can. So I thought, $50,000, that's an awful lot. But he said, I'm mailing you a picture of the church, the window. So sure enough, he mailed me a picture. And but it was snail mail. There weren't any other ways to get it here. He did put a rush on it. So that was Thursday. On Friday, George called, and he said, you were so nice to me to get me here. I really like this place. And he said, you know, I'm 79 years old, and I have $197,000 that I need because you never know what's going to happen. But he said, I have been thinking of you, and I remember how nice you were at Jen's memorial service. And he said, I would like to do something in her honor. And I went, ta-da! And he said, I'd like for you to come and talk to me about it. So I went and talked to him on Friday. And he said, well, I really feel bad. And he said, because I never took care of Jen the way I should have. He said she wanted a little fur jacket like the other ladies at church had, and I said, your sweater will do. She wanted sterling like the other ladies, friends of hers did, and I said, the plastic handle stuff that we have is just fine. And she wanted a tea set, and she wanted a washer and dryer, and I said, the laundromat's only a few blocks away. And I never took care of her the way I wish I had now. So I want to make a gift in her memory and do a memorial. And I said, well, funny you should mention, George, but I have this picture that arrived in the mail, and it's of a window. And he said, well, actually I didn't show him that. I said, I've got a picture on its way. And he said, oh, and it's a stained glass window. It would be really beautiful, and you could do a part of that. And he said, well, how much is it? And I said, well, it's $50,000. And he said, well, I'm 79 years old, and I have $197,000, and you never know what's going to happen, but I'll think about it. So he was going to think about this memorial for Jen. And then on Saturday came and I did weddings. And I don't know if you knew this about me, but I've married more than 4,000 couples, officiated at their weddings. And on Saturday we would have weddings here, which gave us an extra income that we didn't have to pull out of the congregation. And it gave me extra income that I didn't have to ask for from the congregation. So it was a real win situation. And we had more people here on Saturdays than Sundays because of the weddings. And we didn't just do a wedding on every Saturday. We did 4 or 3 weddings every Saturday. And eventually we had the hall and we could have receptions. And so, Saturday I did weddings. Sunday I spoke, and in the chapel, jam-packed, 2 services, jam-packed because of the energy that everyone enjoyed from each other. It wasn't that they came to hear me, it was they came to be together in something we were building. And then in that process, they were getting built. Things in them were coming to fruition. Answers to prayers, of dreams coming true, things being cleared up that were clogging and fogging up their consciousness. It was very special and magical, just as this place is for you today. And I remember very distinctly what I spoke about, because I spoke about going to the source, go directly to God, and don't mess with Mr. in between. And the reason that I did this was because in church work, it's just so wonderful. You have we open the doors, and everyone is welcome to come in. We let you in. And and some of these people have problems with authority. Some of these people have conspiracy consciousness things, and some people are just critical, while other people are generous and loving, and you get the whole alphabet of possibilities. And at that time, someone who was a conspiracy theory type person was saying things to other people about the way the church was going, or how it was run, or where the money was coming from, or whatever, or where the money was going. And so I had to put a stop to that. And the way to do it was to inspire everyone on Sunday morning about going to the source. Go directly to God. And if you have any questions around here, go directly to me instead of asking each other. And then if you were in a restaurant and you were having a problem, you wouldn't ask the busboy, you'd call and ask the manager to help you manage whatever the problem was. And so everyone seemed to get that, and in the future, that kind of conflict all died down and everything was all smoothed over. And so, but I remember that talk, going to the source. That was Sunday. On Monday, George called me and said, I'm ready to talk about this memorial. So by then, on Saturday, while I was doing weddings, the photo came from Dom. And so I put it in my pocket, and then when George said, let's talk about it, I went to George, and he said, well, I've decided about the memorial. He said, I've decided I don't want to do anything or be any part of the window. And I went, oh. And he said, but I do still want to do something to honor Jen, and I'd like for you to help me. And I said, I will be happy to help you in any way. Oftentimes, in my experience, I always do whatever I can to be of help. And I don't usually weigh the consequences or consider the inconvenience, because if I'm of service, I'm really big on this, and I serve, then I will create income, coming in blessings, coming in support, coming in ideas, coming in other tasks to do that are bigger, better, and harder, because I've given. I've created, by giving and sharing and serving, I've created a vacuum. And that vacuum has always been a benefit to me. So it's always good to give and share and serve. So I said, I'll do whatever you ask. And so George said, well, I have decided on a memorial. And he said, what I want to do is I want to put a marker on Jen's grave, a little pillar. And I want to spend $1,000. I'm 79 years old, and I've got $197,000 in the bank, and you never know when it's going to happen. It was at that point that I realized no fur coat, no dishwasher, no washer dryer, no Sterling. No wonder she died. So I said, yes, George, I'll do anything I can. I'll call on the phone, long distance, the cemetery where she is buried, and then I'll have them mail us some pictures of some things that would be in the $7,000 including installation range. And then you can pick what you'd like, and then we'll write them a check and send it to them. And then they'll send us a completed picture of the marker, the pillar at Jen's grave in Massachusetts. So I left thinking, well, that door sure did slam shut. And that was Monday. Then on Tuesday, in the morning, and I was a little crestfallen because that was a little glimmer that had me going. On Tuesday, I got a call from Doug Carroll. And Doug is a woman. And she and her husband was the first barber in El Cajon, in the El Cajon Valley. and they worked hard to make a living for themselves, and they parlayed their hard work into prosperity. And they were caregivers, and they cared for people, and they developed a nursing home, and then that spread into a very large nursing home, and that developed into a mortuary, a flower shop, and a pharmacy. So they could really care for people and be there for people, and their reward was a lot of wealth and success. They were very sweet. She came to church all the time, and they were very humble people, because they had humble beginnings, and they didn't let their wealth rub off or make them big-headed or puffed up. And so she said, could you come to my office, and I wanted to ask you about something. So I said, okay. So I went to her office, and that was on Tuesday. And she said, I wanted you to know that I love our little church. And I got home from church on Sunday, and I realized that I had learned more from that, being in that congregation of people. And it had moved my life in a position that I'm very happy with. And I've just got to tell you, thank you for all the stuff, and thank everybody for all the stuff they did, all the Christmas effort and the pageant and the Santa Claus and all the work that goes into that. And she says, I know about what it takes to make things happen, because having a convalescent care center, a mortuary, a pharmacy, and a floral shop, I've got people all the time, and I've got to manage them, and I know what it takes. And she said, and if it weren't for that church, I wouldn't have gotten to go to the Holy Land and Egypt and China, because I took tours of people. There's somebody in the back there that went to China with us one time. And it was a wonderful experience to be the tour guide for these wonderful people from church. And then when we came home from the tour, not only did we have all kinds of stories to tell, but they were so bonded together that it just made our congregation that much more cohesive. So she said, Sunday was really the Sunday that did it. And I thought, what did it? And she said, you talked about going to the source. And all of a sudden I realized, yeah, that was several days ago. And she said, yes, and what happened was, I realized that I need to tell my crew of people that work for me to come to me when there's all this stuff, because this stuff happens all the time and they don't come to me. So at my staff meeting on Monday morning, I put my foot down and I told them, I'm the boss, you come to me. And with that, she said, I think we had a really good understanding, and the people, and I know who they are that caused the fuss, they're just backed down, because we have avenues of communication that are going to lead to success. So she said, I learned that at my church. And she said, I learned about God's power within me that empowered me to stand up. And I'm a little bitty thing, but I stood up there and I said, I'm the boss. If you have any questions, you come to me. Are there any questions? And everybody was behaved. So she said, I realized too, from some of the things I've learned at that church, that I need to give back to the source that helped me. And I know you're going to be building a building. And I know it's a down the ways road, because we're not quite ready yet, but we're talking about it and we're saving our money for it and we're dreaming about it. And she said, I want to be a part of that dream, and I want to contribute to the construction of the building, but I don't want to pay for walls and floors. I want something outstanding, and I don't want my name on it, and I just want it to be something outstanding. And I said, really? She said, yes. And I said, well, I have this photograph that I got last Saturday. Only one other person has seen it, George. And I said, it's a picture of and she took it and she looked at it, and she said, she asked, being a shrewd businesswoman, where is it? How long will it take to get here? What will you do when it gets here? How will you store it? How will you? And I had just had lots of dreams about it, and I said, well, what we would do is we would put it in a wall outside, and could stand there and be beautiful. The sun could shine through it, and it could be illuminated at night. It would be a stained glass billboard for God. And she said, that sounds like a good idea. How much is it? I said, well, it's $50,000. And then I was going to say, and if you wanted to do part of it, maybe some other families would leap in. But before I could say that, she said, who do I make the check out to? And I fighting a rage of goosebumps, I said, to the church. And so she made the check out to the church, and then I promptly endorsed it, and then it was all in safekeeping. Then I called Dom, and I said, I want the window, I have a buyer, but before I buy it and we sign the contract and everything, I should see it. He said, okay, get on the first plane you can and fly to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. So that night at 9 o'clock, I left San Diego on a red eye and landed in Chicago, and then from Chicago flew to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania on a little puddle jumper with Republic Airlines. I'll never forget it. And I got to the airport. Dom met me. We looked at the window. It was astonishing. Although it had a fog of soot on the inside and the outside from the coal-burning 100 years it had been in Pennsylvania. But you could still see the magnificence and the beauty. Then we went from the church where it was to a shipper stained glass studio that was going to dismantle it, crate it, and ship it to California. So we did all that, and found out how long it would take, and that would be included in the price. So then that was Wednesday that I flew there. Thursday I saw the painting, the window, and then I flew home Thursday night. And then Friday, because I had pictures that were developed on film that Dom had taken when he took the original picture. I had a 5 or 6 really good pictures of it, and I took those, and I took Doug to lunch at Anthony's Fish Grotto, because that was the fanciest place I could take her, and it was my treat, and we were going to look at those pictures, and then she would know the timeline of when the picture would be, the window would be dismantled and brought to California, and what we would do. And so she was delighted, I was delighted. It was just a very sweet. Then as we are leaving Anthony's, in walks Mr. Antoffi. Mr. Antoffi is a stained glass artist who did the windows in our chapel. And they were all in by this occurrence. And I knew him, and he and his brother were very close, and they worked on stained glass together. They had Antoffi Studios, and they were creative and artistic. They did a lot of work for Hubble, and they did the stained glass in the San Diego church on Altadena, and a lot of other churches. And so I said, this has come in, this window is coming, and I'd sure like it if you would work on it. And he said he would just be delighted. And I said, well, we need an address to have it shipped to, so may I ship it to your address? And he said yes. And he said, I can figure out its square footage and how long it's going to take, but I'll refurbish it, clean it, and get it ready to be installed. And I was just really grateful. And we had lunch, and I never expected to see him. I was going to call him in the next few days, but there he walked in, and there he was. And so that was on Friday at Anthony's. Then on Saturday, between weddings, I had a meeting with the architect to start in designing the wall that the window would go in. There was earthquake and sound wave proof, and then how to cover it with bulletproof glass on each side. And that was Saturday. And then Sunday, I was able to announce in the church that a gift had been given and it was on its way, and soon everyone would get to see it. So that happened from Sunday, with Sunday in the middle, go to the source, and then the next Sunday to announce it. And there are so many ingredients in this that I think are just very important. No one could have made this happen. It just came together. And so one of and now as we share this, I want you to know this, and I want you to be thankful for it and to go, wow, that principle of divine order works. And it works in my life too, and then own that. I would like also for you to own this window as not theirs, but ours. And I have a stake in it. I'm part of that, and it belongs to me. And then bring your friends here to show them your priceless collection and share with them this good news message that Unity has. I'd also like for you to think about these quick little points I want to make, because this can apply to you. This is about you. It's not about me and history and something that happened in the 80s. This is about principle that is alive and well and can work right this minute just as dramatically now as it did then. It's ongoing and ageless. So, first of all, that little ad represented the thoughtfulness of another. Who knows what good you do when you see something that somebody else needs to know about, or send somebody a card, or send somebody a call, or just tell somebody a little bit of information, or that you care, or that you love them. Who knows how far that's going to go? Then I followed through on that little piece of paper when I called Dom, and by following through, life had given me something, and I couldn't see any value in it. And it was all over as far as the print went. But when I followed through, I opened the possibilities. What would have happened if I hadn't followed through and called Dom? Then I had rays of hope from George. And, I want to do something for Jen. And I was so hopeful, and that hopefulness kept me going. And then he slammed the door on all the rays of light, and you could just see them all. They were shining. They just all went down to one little narrow thump, and that was it. But I had felt so well and good and happy that something was up and possibly going to happen that I just retained those good feelings. And so I think that often there are rays of encouragement, and when we can live on those rays even if they disappear. Where one door shuts, another door opens. And while it's shutting, we can say, that wasn't meant to be. And I'm glad that it's shut. That saves me a lot of what I don't need to experience. And I just know something else is going to open up. And that's one of our unity principles. And then that sudden stop from George gave me an opportunity to test my faith. Well, I believe that, I had the picture, I knew it was out there. Is this going to manifest? And is this meant to be? And then there came this sudden answer. I wasn't in Doug's office 15 minutes before she said, "How much is it? I'll write the check." It was just all happened so quickly. And maybe part of that was due to her realization that she was the source and you need to go to the source. And maybe she had learned that at church because I was not particularly wonderfully inspiring, but I was doing my job as best I could. And because I did my best, she did her best. And then having the window there, or on paper, or from the airport, or back here in crates, I had to see it to believe it, or was it believe it to see it? And whichever way, it was all working in unison with each other. And then when I showed the pictures to Doug, that was magical. And then when we ran into Mr. Antoffi at Anthony's, that was divine order. And all of this happened, and it was done. It was ours. It was in the mail, on its way in 14 days, a fortnight. And I couldn't have been more astonished, more surprised, more grateful. And that can happen again and again to me, to you, to any of us, to all of us. And when we put our dreams together for the future of our church, and we're on a real delightful launching pad with the search for a new minister. I mean, the time is just great to know this, and then to roll up our sleeves and be in unison with this idea. We're going to magnetically draw the most delightful person that has ever served here. And this is going to take off just for this time and in the universe, just like it needs to, just like it should, just like it shall. Then the crates of glass came, that none were broken. It was all perfect. They landed at Mr. Antoffi's studio. It took about a month for them to arrive. I took Doug to the studio. This was a very important thing. She, being a businesswoman and a builder, she wanted to see this. And Mr. Antoffi had a piece of the window out of a crate. And it was this piece that's the angel on this side up at the top. And Mr. Antoffi, this was so sweet, he had tears in his eyes to touch this masterpiece, this master of all stained glass Louis Comfort Tiffany work, and to clean it. And he showed me how in the feathers of the angel are little indentions to rattle the light so that you can see them more clearly, and so that even from a distance they're more beautiful. And he explained that Tiffany was the artist who created the device while the glass was molten to make these little fine feather dents in the glass without whatever he was using getting burned because it was molten hot or sticking or whatever. And then he explained that the drapery part of Jesus' costume and other costumes in the window all have folds in them like cloth would have, and it was created somehow, which is a lost art, of molten glass that had to be just in the shape of the fold that would later be cut and have lead put around it and installed in a window. So to get to work on this, he said, at my age, this is a phenomenal honor. And so when we finished that appointment, and I had told Doug about the Antoffi brothers, I said, how's your brother, and will he be helping? And he just looked away, and his wife, who was right there by his side, also working, and he had a crew, many family members helping him, because this was a big task, and it was really dirty, and they needed a lot of work, very careful work. His wife said he and his brother have had an argument, and they haven't spoken in years. And I thought, oh, well, that is unfortunate, because they were such a team, and they seemed like they were just so bonded together. And so then a couple of weeks later, Doug and I went back. And when we saw the work, and we saw his passion, and we saw how he was so grateful and happy, we also saw that he was not well. And when we got in the car to leave, Doug said, that man is not well. His skin tone is very jaundiced. The whites of his eyes are very yellow. He's not well. He's not long for this world. Being a person who knew about aging and nursing and all that, she spotted that right away. So when I got back to my office, I called And his wife answered the phone like she always did. And I said, I just want you to know I'm concerned about your husband and you and your kids that are all working on this window. Is there anything I can do? And she said, no, but she said, we just hope he lasts long enough to finish this, because to end his life this way, you have no idea what a gift this is to him and his family. And I said, well, is his brother available to help? And she said, they've had problems, and I don't know. And I said, well, maybe if you called the sister-in-law, if there is one. She said, I should do that. So she called. And then she called me back a few days later, and she said, well, his brother has joined him, and they've healed their rift, and they're working on the window together. And that, so not only is this helping him the last days of his life, but it's also helping his brother, because his brother has the exact same condition. And the condition was caused by lead poisoning. The gift they gave, the art of stained glass, touching it day in and day out for more than 60 years, got into their blood and released them to a higher form of life. And then what we were aiming for was to get the window wall in by Easter. And we had already put down the slab that you're sitting on right now. And so then when the wall would come up and the window would be in it, then we would unveil that on Easter morning. And we did that. I was trying to figure out, how do we get a piece of cloth that big up there to unveil. And I realized that what we could do is we could flood the front of the window with helium balloons, and then I just ran along the bottom of it with a pair of scissors, and all those balloons were released, and the window was unveiled on Easter morning, and that was a beautiful experience. In the meantime, then, but days before it was to be installed, both the Antofi brothers passed away, and their families were sad and they were hurting, but they had this window to install, and they had days to do it. So they did it, and they were working Thursday, Friday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and got it all in place and ready to go for Sunday morning, when we came at 4 o'clock in the morning to blow up the balloons for the 10 o'clock worship service. Out on the slab in the beautiful California sunshine. And they said that putting it together at that last moment helped them grieve, because it was like they were fulfilling their father and uncle respectively's wishes. And so but who knew? I mean, I hope that you see the window and you're inspired, but who knew that would have such an impact on them, a phenomenal impact. And then lastly, George's daughter called from Washington, and she said, Daddy died. And she said he wanted to be cremated, and he didn't want any service because he said no one would come. I thought, well, that's pretty right. So she said, and he's going to be buried next to Jen with the little marble pillar. And she said, but something that's very interesting that's happened to us is every day, he was 79 years old, and he had $197,000 in the bank, and he went to the bank every day and to visit his money, although it was in paper, And what we found out with his death is that he left all his money to the girl at the bank. And she said, we were doing an investigation. I said, well, when you know the bottom line of this, please give us a call. Give me a call. So a year later, she called and she said, we went through the bank and all the legal things, and we found that he was manipulated by her lovely, charming kindness into giving her his money, and she also provided him with the form to sign and everything. So her days in banking are done, and we got all our money. And so she said, thank you very much for all you did for Daddy. You're very welcome. And so, but every story has its completion, and then the energy that it's created begins again. And I trust that hearing about this and knowing the magic that was involved, that just all came together because it was meant to be, is helpful to you and inspiring to you, so that all that it's going to take for the next era, the next possibility, the next chapter of your life is just waiting for you to believe that it's there and it's on its way to you, and then believe it, and then you'll see it, or see it in your mind's eye, and then you'll believe it. And the same principles that created this lovely piece of work that's so beautiful in our church home, that same principle will bring about the answers and the fulfillment and the loveliness that you would like to have in your life. With these thoughts in mind, let's bow our heads. And Father, we give thanks for everyone that we've mentioned this morning that's been involved in this unfoldment of the appearance of the window. Bless them wherever they are. Bless them on their way. And then for all the people that have seen the window and enjoyed it, bless them for the memories that they have that took place in front of it. And then, Father, bless us to see the possibilities that you would love to share with us in our lives if only we would let them in. May we say, I'm open and receptive. May we say, bring unto me that which is for my highest good. And thank you, Father, for a divine order, and thank you for this time of reflection. And may we go from this place with the values that you have individually nudged within us during this time. We ask this in your name. Amen.